Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 8, The Dragon, the Serpent, and the Cross, from Facing the Sphinx by Marie L. Farrington. Chapter 7, The Dragon, the Serpent, and the Cross. The monogram, or symbol of the god Saturn, was the sign of the cross, together with a ram's horn in imitation of the Lamb of God. Reverend Robert Taylor. As stated before, St. John's Revelation is one of the masterpieces of occult science, and we cannot begin our glossary on the dragon with more fitting words than those of St. John himself. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. The myth referred to in this passage by St. John was so universal that it is identically related in the Grecian theogony, and has survived in the Roman Catholic cult in the person of the Virgin Mary. In the secret doctrine, we find an able interpretation of this legend. So occult and mystic is one of the aspects of Latona that she is made to reappear even in Revelation as the woman clothed with the sun, Apollo, and the moon, Diana, under her feet, who being with child, cries, travailing in birth, pained to be delivered. A great red dragon stands before the woman, ready to devour the child. She brings forth the man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and who was caught unto the throne of God, the Son. The woman fled to the wilderness, still pursued by the dragon, who flies again and casts out of his mouth water as a flood, when the earth helped the woman and swallowed the flood. And the dragon went to make war with the remnant of her seed, who keep the commandment of God. Anyone who reads the allegory of Latona, pursued by the Typhon sent by Juno to devour her baby, will recognize the identity of the two versions. The baby is Apollo, the sun. For the man-child who was to rule all nations with an iron rod of Revelation is surely not the meek Son of God Jesus, but the physical Son who rules all nations, the dragon being the North Pole, gradually chasing the early Lemurians from the lands which became more and more hyperborean and unfit to be inhabited by those who were fast developing into physical men. For they had now to deal with climatic variations. The dragon will not allow Latona to bring forth, the sun to appear. She is driven from heaven and finds no place where she can bring forth until Neptune, the ocean, moved with pity, makes immovable the floating isle of Delos, the nymph Asteria, hitherto hiding from Jupiter under the waves of the ocean, on which Latona finds refuge, and where the bright god Apollo is born. The god no sooner appears than he kills Python, the cold and frost of the Arctic regions, in whose deadly coils all life becomes extinct. In other words, Latona Lemuria is transformed into Niobe Atlantis, over which her son Apollo, or the sun, reigns with an iron rod truly, since Herodotus makes the Atlantes curse his too great heat. Latona became a powerful goddess, and her cult has been always growing, every one of her attributes having been revived by the Popish Church, her son, the sun, being the great solar god of antiquity and of Christendom. The war in heaven is essentially an astronomical myth which was preserved by the archaic races, and was transmitted to posterity in the legends of the War of the Titans against the gods in Hesiod, in the War of the Asuras against the Devas, and in the Central American Quinames against the gods. It has been proven that at the time of the war in heaven, all the planets, except Saturn, were in conjunction, and according to Hesiod and Moses, Saturn, or the moon god, prevailed. Undoubtedly, the whole passage formerly quoted has been gotten up to perpetuate the remembrance of terrible revolutions and cataclysms in the heavens and on earth. Because the two poles anciently denoted a good and a bad dragon, the former typifying the North Pole, or heaven of the Hyperboreans, and the latter the South Pole, abode of the cosmic elementals. All the archaic races reverenced the symbol of the dragon. Hence we encounter it in every mythology. The oldest nation in our present humanity is the Chinese, and among her people we find the emblem of the dragon surviving in spite of changes of dynasties, and still flying in high colors on the national standard. The emperor's throne is the dragon's seat, and his dresses of state are embroidered with the likeness of the dragon. The aphorisms in the oldest Chinese books point plainly to an occult significance, for they extol the yellow dragon as the chief of all, and as a being endowed with unfathomable wisdom and virtue on account of his living alone, which means that he is an ascetic. He wanders in the heavens wherever he pleases, fulfilling the decree or karma. He is an embodiment of the Christian providence in that respect, portraying also perfection and wisdom. Sutifon, the Egyptian dragon, was of a red complexion like the dragon of Revelation, the same hue being retained for the giants and in the beard of thunder, who was killed by Jack the giant killer. The word teni in English heraldry means the dragon's head. The dragon is also associated with the early legend of the Serpent of Paradise, who wished to impart knowledge to the first pair, for it is said that he taught Fohi how the sexes were divided. It is for the same reason that the Ophites held the serpent in such high esteem. They claimed that the first pair were initiated into the mysteries by the dragon, who taught them that which divided the sexes. Therefore, the dragon was essentially a mystic symbol linked with the primeval glyphs, for his soul resided in the Great Bear, the words soul and star being synonymous in the Egyptian language. It is held by symbologists that primitively the two constellations of the Great Bear and Little Bear were only one, or the mother and her progeny, her 7 sons. The crocodile or dragon is one type in Egyptian, and Sevek means 7. This assertion is sustained by the astronomer Proctor, who claims that the lesser bear was in ancient times a portion of the dragon, and his opinion is corroborated by the explanation of the myth of the dragon, or Egyptian crocodile. To the same symbol we can trace back the 7 crowns of Revelation, who were the 7-headed dragon of the pole. The pole of the world is called the soul of Rhea, Typhon, by the Pythagoreans, exclaims Proclus. There is a polar dragon whose coilings round and round on itself when A Draconis was a pole star were made at the pivotal center of motion in the planisphere, and with the lesser bear for its 7 heads, we can identify the 7-headed dragon of the mythos. Natural Genesis. The dragon as a glyph preceded the serpent as an emblem of the geological phase preceding the formation of our Earth, i.e., before it was the fit abode of human races. It is linked with a creation which was sunk below the waters. Therefore, it was not accidentally that the northern shaft of the Pyramid of Giza was built like a huge telescopic tube focusing the star A Draconis, which has been the pole star, and is on its way back to the polar center of starry motion. Another type of the Typhonian genetrix, or Great Bear, is the unicorn, because horn is an emblem of duration, and beasts prevail on account of their power of resistance. The ritual mentions the horn and the beak, when in the ascendant, Venus is said to be on the horn, and the red dragon of Revelation had 10 horns. The national arms of England contain a copy of Typhon personifying the unicorn and the lion. Philo says that in the symbol of the coiled-up snake, the eye in the center had to be visible inside of the circle. In the emblem of the 7-headed dragon turning round on its inner eye, the interpretation is identical. The polar star, or dragon's eye, being the pivot of heavenly revolutions. The tree with the 7 branches of the Mithra cult is also surrounded with the sun, moon, and 7 stars, and a male and a female. It signifies the birthplace of the beginning, around which the 7-headed dragon, Typhon or crocodile, is continually revolving. Hesiod describes the terrible dragon that watches the all-golden apples lying in a cavern of the dark earth at its furthest extremity. Prometheus, the divine benefactor of rising humanity, persuaded Hercules to send Atlas for the coveted fruit, while he should assume provisionally the place of supporter of the heavens. This legend, which reveals an interesting part of the history of our globe, ends with the hero carrying the golden apples to the north, because it was the center of heaven and the seat of the good dragon. Astronomically, the dragon of the North Pole, or the Great Bear, personified one revolution, year, annus or cycle, and was an intelligencer to men, the indicator of seasons, solstices and equinoxes. But when men became aware that there was a change taking place, that Adraconis was losing its place, then it became the bad dragon. The sign was rejected as false. Thus, there were two dragons, one typifying good and its opponent representing evil. Under this latter aspect, it is Apophis, the monster of theology, or Kakotsmon, the black one. He is the eternal adversary of Agathodemon, the good serpent. The dragon was universally connected with number 7 in India as the seven-headed Sesha, in Egypt as the crocodile dragon Sevek, or seven, and the seven-headed dragon of Akkad, because it indicated the end of a cycle or period. Linked with an idea of flood, deluge, dispersion, or cataclysm, it typifies the conclusion of an age contemporaneous with the stellar imagery and the dawn of a new era. The cast-out dragon gave place to the solar god. Apollo, the brilliant son of Latona, kills Python the dragon and takes his place as the inspirer of the oracles, hence light supersedes darkness. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Now the beast with the 2 horns typifies the lamb, or the epoch when the sun entered the sign of the ram, and dethroned the old dragon by taking its place. Under this aspect, Typhon is transformed into the solar crocodile, who lays 60 eggs, is 60 days in hatching them, and lives 60 years. Thus was transmitted to posterity the first measure adopted by Egyptian astronomers. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. As stated formerly, the wisdom contained in occult works is frequently rendered in numbers. Thus, in this instance, the dawn of the new era inaugurated by the entrance of the sun into the ram is typified by the 4 corners and the nadir and zenith, or number 6. In the Egyptian symbology, it combines the planetary and solar character in the personification of Saturn and Ra, or the sun. Blended together, it leaves only 6 planets, a reduction of 1 from the wounded cast-out beast or dragon who lost one of its heads. The 3 letters SSS accompany the 7-rayed solar dragon, and the 3 S's are generally read as 666. Vishnu, in his solar character, is related to number 6 as the type of the 6 directions of space. The Abrasax was the 6-sided cube figure of the solar foundation, and Sut, the son of Typhon, is also number 6, because his birthplace was in the south, hence his name Su, or SSS. There is a tradition pointing to the fact that the Egyptian priests told Herodotus that the sun did not always rise in the north, therefore a reminiscence of its former birthplace, the south, was treasured as sacred, and the beast of Revelation being also identified with 666, or SSS, which is related with the name of a man as Pharaoh, or number 43, we may safely conclude that the second beast with the 2 horns was identical with the beginning of a new cycle, inaugurated by the sun entering a new sign, the sign of the ram. It was the signal of a final planetary stage symbolized by Saturn, who is also represented with a ram's horn, or a crescent, combining the symbol of the moon and the lamb. Such is the origin of the Jewish god Jehovah, the moon god, and the Christian lamb, or son of God, Jesus Christ, sprung from the same source. Elemental, stellar, lunar, solar, each phase has to develop from the one preceding it. The great dragon combines the 4 elements of the abyss and is in its turn dethroned by the lunar mythos, represented by the female slayer of the dragon, who becomes the female Jehovah of the Jews. The latter is the mirror or reflector of the sun. Hence the woman in the ritual boasts that she made the Eye of Horus when it was not forthcoming at the 15th day of the month. Such is the origin of the eye as a symbol of deity. A woman standing on a globe in the act of bruising the head of the serpent is frequently seen in the Roman Catholic Church. It is a perfect counterpart of the woman of the planisphere. It is on Christ, Mass, day when Jesus Christ, Krishna, Buddha, Apollo, Osiris, or any of the sun gods are born, that the constellation Virgo arises on the horizon, holding the new babe in her arms and trodding underfoot the serpent. That woman was Isis with her child Horus in Egypt. It is now Mary with the infant Jesus among the Christians. It is also the woman of Revelation. Typhon, the mythical dragon, combined the abyss, or source of all things, in itself. It was emblematically rendered by the hole of the snake, and also by the egg that emanated from the mouth of the serpent, because it typified a circle, revolution, or age. Such is the origin of our Easter eggs. We have explained in a former chapter the part played by the serpent in the biblical fall. Let us only add that some of the rabbis relate that the old serpent, having shed his own skin presently after the fall of man, Elohim made a garment of it to clothe Adam and Eve. This process of reclothing the Adam of the fall is evidently a myth, embodying the first initiation of material men into the deep mysteries of renovation and spiritual rebirth. For the sloughing snake was essentially an emblem of transformation. Magnificent ruins attest to the present day the grandeur of the glyph embodied in the serpent and the acknowledged dominion of its secret mysteries. It was venerated by the ancients as a symbol of eternity, of rebirth, of immortality, of wisdom. None has impressed the mysterious attributes of the serpent more strongly than Wotan, the great Kish legislator, who was, he declares, the son of a serpent and yet a serpent himself. In such capacity he entered a subterranean passage that ran to the roots of heaven, which was only the hole of a snake. This was a term used by initiates synonymous with circle of necessity and inevitable circle. It was also the circle of transformation when referring to the human races. Proclus states that in the most holy mysteries the neophytes were divested of their garments to participate in a divine nature. The new robe was the garment of salvation. It was accounted sacred and held in the greatest esteem by the adepts, who associated their new raiment with their spiritual and divine rebirth. As initiates, they were called serpents of wisdom, because the serpent, biting his own tail, formed the circle of wisdom, which was also an emblem of the spirit of life, or immortality. Kabbalists assert that chaos, theos, cosmos are the three foundation stones of space, that is, the embodiment of the unknown first cause. Therefore, space is the body of the universe with its 7 principles, and space is also called the Great Sea. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Genesis. The Gnostics were also called Ophites, or serpent worshippers. They were the first among the secret orders who divulged the arcane signification of the Jewish substitute for Ein Sof, or the absolute silent one. They worshipped the serpent coiled around the sacramental loaf, which is the Egyptian Tau, and is in itself phallic glyph. Seen here as the great serpent of space, or the dragon, it is the symbol of the manifested deity and its great wisdom. It is Sophia, the divine Sophia of the Gnostics. Still under another aspect, namely that of the dual androgyne. As a unit, it is the Logos manifesting under a double principle of good and evil, because the serpent or dragon is the spirit of doubt or controversy which leads into inquiry and results in knowledge. Therefore, when separated, the two Gnostic emblems typify the tree of life spiritual and the tree of knowledge. Hence, Ophis is represented in Genesis as urging the first human couple, the production of matter, which is the source of evil, to eat the forbidden fruit and become immortal. Ye shall not surely die. Egypt, the fountain source from which spring all our religious tenets, personified the soul of the world as an enormous serpent standing on human legs, Champollion. It is frequently portrayed with a beard in Gnostic engravings and is identical with Agathodemon, the good genius of the Ophites. The latter was endowed with knowledge of good and evil and possessed divine wisdom. Iamblichus and Champollion after him have both recognized in Snoupis, or the soul of the world, the great thought Hermes, who was the occult personification of the celestial gods fire. It is obviously the origin of the generic name of thought Hermes, which was intimately linked with those of prophets, seers, and initiates. The latter were frequently called serpents of wisdom because they were allegorically connected with the serpent, to whom is due their enlightenment through the solar and planetary gods of the earliest intellectual races. Moreover, Snoupis was also the spiritual son of enlightenment and the patron of the Egyptian initiates, while under the name of Bel-Merodach, the Chaldeans reverenced the same symbol and denominated their adepts Nebos, or Enochs. Any scholar who understands the name of Nebo will also perceive the reason why Moses disappears on Mount Nebo and why his fiery serpents belong to the evil aspect of the dual Ophis. Among the ancients, the serpent was the most venerated symbol of their mysteries. As a representative of renewed life and immortality, it is met with on the doors of the chambers of the dead in the Egyptian and Chaldean tombs. Among the moderns, it is yet a symbol of eternity in the bracelet of the fashionable woman for whom emblems are meaningless. It coils around the walking stick in our days as it did in bygone ages around the mythical tree. The Celestial Empire has preserved its great dragon, but the old Norse sea king's serpent is forgotten. Draconis was the North Pole, or the dragon of the north, identical with the fiery serpent that vivifies, while Hydra is the green dragon, or the water serpent of the south. The head and tail of the dragon, which represented the ascending and descending nodes of the moon, are also imaged as the two serpents that were strangled by the infant Hercules as soon as he was born. His nest, or cradle, was denoted by the twining serpents of the caduceus, the head and tail of which were called the points of the ecliptic. The serpent typified the mystery of all mysteries on account of its sloughing and self-renewal, which are considered to last 3 months, or the period of our winter solstice. Then the newborn solar god appeared and cut it in two, placing the two halves in heaven at the dividing point of the equinox. Such was also the significance of Moses' brazen serpent, with its ram's horns shaped in the form of a shining aureole, though the myth may be also interpreted as the lunar goddess who reproduces the light, as the reflector and eye of Horus, or eye of Osiris. Every astronomer besides occultists and astrologers knows that figuratively the astral light, the Milky Way, and also the path of then sun to the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, as well as the circles of the sidereal or tropical year, were always called serpents, in the allegorical and mystic phraseology of the adepts. Secret doctrine. Christians themselves are reminded of the great wisdom inherent and acknowledged to have existed in the emblem of the serpent by Jesus, who recommended his disciples to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. The 7 great planetary spirits are the agents of the 7 stars of the Great Bear, who is the Genetrix, Typhon, Set, and even Apophis, the dragon killed by the solar god Horus. Under this aspect, it is the bad dragon, and as such he becomes the dark side of Osiris, the contrast between light and darkness. The same system was adopted by the Greeks, who depicted the abstract deity, Zeus, as a sublime conception, while the Olympic Zeus or Jove represents human intelligence in its lower aspect. The serpent Zeus tempts man, and in the course of time begets the solar Bacchus, who is the universal Christos, conceived and reproduced in the myths of every archaic nation. If we consider that Akasa, or the astral light, is the universal soul, that it fills space, and that without it there could be no manifested universe, we will conclude that it must be the cause of good and evil. It is a fatal light which kills and destroys, says Eliphas Levi. And St. Paul exclaims, it is sown a soul body, it is raised a spirit body. And in another passage he refers to it as the prince of the air. Lead us not into temptation is a terrible exhortation addressed by sinful man to his own sinful nature. There is no cause without effect, nor effect without a cause. Therefore, man himself generates the action of the great magic agent called the Serpent of the Great Sea, or space. Ignorance is the cause of all wickedness, for should man know and understand that he is the creator of his own sufferings, he would certainly make strenuous efforts to conquer his evil tendencies. He would soon realize that knowledge is wisdom and not power, in the materialistic and wicked sense of the world. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed a little season. Revelation chapter 20. Obviously, this passage refers to the A Draconis, which played false when it ceased to be the central point around which the starry heaven used to revolve, and which will be let loose again for a little season, when the time comes for it to reassume its old place as the North Pole's pivot. In Syro-Chaldean occultism, both Ophis and Ophiomorphos, the good and the bad serpent or devil, are united in the zodiac at the sign of the androgyne Virgo Scorpio, thus combining the emblem of life's duality of good and evil, Before its fall on Earth, the serpent was Ophis Christos, but after its fall it became Ophiomorphos Christos, or the evil principle. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.